Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a fruit cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake is just loaded with nuts and candied fruit and dried fruit and really just enough cake batter to hold everything together. So the first thing you need to do is to preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 160 degrees Celsius. And then we will need an 8-inch, 20-centimeter springform pan. Got the two pieces here with the clamp. So you just put that in there, whoop, clamp that down. And then I am going to butter my pan, both the bottom and the sides. And what I've done is I melted just a little butter, and then I've got a pastry brush. I find it much easier to do it that way than taking like a hunk of butter and then rubbing it. Makes it a little quicker to do it this way. So then just make sure you got everything well greased here. And then what we want to do is to line the bottom. So I just have a round here. Put that there. This is going to make it much easier for us to unmold our cake when we're done. And then what I've done is taken a long strip of parchment paper. And this, what you want to do, I think this is about 3 inches, which is what, 7.5 centimeter sides. So you want to cut your parchment paper to go a little, like maybe an inch or so, maybe I've got 2 inches above the rim. So, you know, maybe 4 or 5 centimeters up, like so. And then just, mine's a little longer, so I'm gonna butter that. So you can see if you butter your pan, really, your parchment will really stick. Okay, so as you can see here, a fruit cake has so many ingredients. So what I like to do, just so I don't forget anything, is to do, what I would do at home is to do what I've done here and get everything done before you actually start making your fruit cake. So if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer, or really you could just large bowl wooden spoon. The first ingredient you will need is 1 cup, 225 grams of butter. I like the unsalted. I prefer the flavor. You could use salted here as well, either one. Just leave, if you're using salted butter, as always, just leave out the salt that's called for in the recipe. Now first I'm just going to beat the butter, just until it gets nice and smooth. And whenever you're making any kind of batter, make sure you scrape down the sides and the bottom of your bowl as much as you need to make sure everything gets mixed together. So the next ingredient is 1 cup, 210 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. Just going to dump that in there. And then I'm going to beat this on medium-high speed, probably 2-3 minutes. We want to get some air in the batter in these two ingredients, so maybe 2-3 minutes on medium-high speed. Okay, that looks good. As you can see, we're just looking to get them all nicely creamed together with some air. Next, you will need 3 large eggs. That would be 165 grams out of the shell. And have your eggs at room temperature. And I'm going to add them one at a time because they mix in better if I do it one at a time. So I'm going to beat that in, then add the next one, add the next one. I'm going to just scrape this down, make sure everything's mixed in. There's a lot of liquid. You got the fat, the butter, and then all these eggs. So you know, your batter, if it curdles, don't worry about it. That's very normal here. I'm just going to beat this just for a second more. Okay. Because once we add our dry ingredients, if there's curdling, that'll just smooth right out. So now, next, we are making a traditional fruit cake, which means it has some booze, alcohol, both in the cake, and then we're going to brush the outside of the cake. So I am now adding 3 tablespoons, 35 grams. Now, you can use, there's various choices. I'm using Grand Marnier because I like that orange flavor. You could use just a cognac, you could use a sherry, you could use a rum, probably whiskey, you know, whatever you like and have in the house. And then also what you will need is the zest, which is the outside skin, plus the juice of 1 orange, which I've already done that. So I have, now always, when you're doing this, wash your fruit first, and then I've used like a microplane. You could use a box grater to get your zest, and then cut it in half and squeeze the juice. For reference purposes, I mean, really, we're just doing this for a little flavor. This is about 1/4 cup, 60 grams of orange juice. And then we also are going to do, just get the zest of one lemon. Again, wash your lemon first, and then get the zest. You know, adding a little bit of citrus juice and the zest really kind of perks up all the flavors in your cake. So there we go. And I'm just going to beat that in. Like I said, you're going to have some major curdling of your batter here with all that liquid, but we will remedy that in a moment. So, in a separate bowl, I have 2 cups, 260 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that is plain flour. And I'm also going to add to this 3/4 cup, 75 grams of ground almonds. Now, these ones I just bought. You know, you can buy bags of ground almonds. I find in your grocery store, a lot of times now they're on the baking aisle or in the health food section. Or what you can do is just take some almonds and put them in your food processor and just process them until they're finely ground. Just be careful you don't overdo it and then you end up with a paste. And then also I'm adding 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, and then 1/4 teaspoon, or no, 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. I'm just going to whisk that together. And then the most important part is the nuts and our fruit. Because that's what a fruit cake is all about. So you will need 2 1/4 pounds, which is 1 kilogram, of a variety of dried and candied fruit. Really, this is up to you. You can use the fruits that you like and that you can find. I'm going to tell you just kind of what I have here. I'm using a combination of the dark raisins, golden raisins, and I'm kind of using about equal weight of each of these. I'm using some dried, I have here both dried cranberries and dried cherries, and then I have some dried figs, and I've cut them, you know, kind of coarsely chopped them up. Always when you're cutting figs, make sure you take off that, there's a little end on it, cut that off and then cut them up. Prunes, sometimes I use a combination of figs and prunes. And, you know, another idea is like apricots or mango, because it has that bright, nice orange color that kind of pops in your fruitcake. So, you know, that's another thing. I'm also using, because I really like them, the candied cherries. I like the color, and I do like Candied cherries, what can I say? And then I'm also using the candied mixed peel that you can buy. And just as a side note here, you know, a lot of times your candied fruit, you can only kind of find around the holiday season. So what I do is I usually buy extra. Sometimes I wait till after Christmas when it goes on sale, and just pick up a few extras so I can make, if I want to make a fruit cake or other things during the rest of the year. And we need some chopped nuts. You will need 1 cup, 100 grams of chopped nuts. I'm using almonds since I kind of I got the ground almonds, so I'll keep the almond thing going on. But you could use walnuts, pecans, hazelnuts, or kind of a combination. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dump all of these. Now, because at home you really don't have to put in separate like I've done. I just wanted to show you the variety. You could just dump when you're measuring out your 2 1/4 cups, 2 1/4 pounds, sorry, or 1 kilogram. Just put it in a large bowl. As you can see, this is a lot of fruit here. And now, because some of the, especially your dried fruits, kind of stick together. So what I do at this point is I just take a couple big spoonfuls of my flour, and then I just kind of toss. One, because, you know, like your raisins and stuff like, and your dried cranberries and cherries, they tend to like kind of stick together. So the flour, I get my hands in there to kind of separate them so you don't get like clumps in your fruit cake. So as you can see, this is not difficult. I find the most work to me is just getting everything measured out, that part, and cut up and all that kind of stuff. But the actual batter is fairly easy to make. So I'm just going to wipe my hands here. Now I'm going to add all of this. So as you can see, that's a lot of fruit and nuts. Sure you get all the flour. And then I'm going to slowly mix this in. If you want to, you could do it just by hand, or I'm going to try to use my beater here. Okay, as you can see, and everything you can see, it's amazing how it all mixed straight in there. So now all that's left is our flour mixture. And I'll just slowly mix that in. And we're done. As you can see, really, the time is assembling all your ingredients. Now, just going to make sure all that flour. Oh, great. So I just put in here. Now, as you know, well, if you've ever made this kind of fruit cake, we are going to, once we finish baking it and cooling it, we're going to brush the outside with alcohol. And we have to feed this, brush it like over, I'd say at least a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. You know, once or twice a week, you brush the cake with alcohol. So this is a cake that if you're making it for Christmas is when, you know, most people want it. So, you know, you want to start it, you know, at least, I'd say 2-3 weeks before, so maybe, you know, the beginning of December. So this is a do ahead, which is great because we're busy during the holiday season. And if we can do something ahead of time, all the better. And then this cake, you can freeze it, you can keep it. Because we are going to brush it with a lot of alcohol, not only does it give your cake a lot of flavor, it preserves it. So it's a really cake that you can freeze or keep, in a cool place for several months. So now I'm just going to press this down. As you saw, it was a very thick batter. Now you can, if you want at this point, you can decorate the top with some, nuts, almonds or pecans or, walnuts, if you want to do that. Or a lot of people, what they like to do is once they're ready to serve the cake, they decorate it then with maybe, some candied cherries and some toasted nuts, and then just use some jam, apricot preserves or something as a glue. So either way, or you could just skip that and just enjoy the cake as is, which is typically, a lot of times that's what I do. So just make sure this is all pat down, because this is really, as you saw, really thick batter. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And then, like I said, you could take, hopefully you can see over the parchment, you can just take some almonds and just press it into the top, the way you want, if you want to do that, which we will. So now, this cake, because we have a lot of fruit and nuts, it takes quite a while to bake. We are going to bake it at 325 or the 160 for 1 hour. Then you're going to turn your heat down to 300, that's 150 C, and we're going to bake it for an additional, I'd say 80 to 90 minutes. So it's going to, and it's going to turn nice and brown, and then when you take a skewer or toothpick and put it in, you will get like a few moist crumbs coming out. If you find it really over browns and you don't like that, you could put some foil over the top. And as always, everyone's oven is a little different. Sometimes your oven can run a little hot, so check it, check it before. If I say 80 minutes, check it maybe at 70 minutes, at that final 70 minutes, because we don't want to overbake it. So 1 hour, and then turn your oven down to 300 Fahrenheit, 160, 150, and then another 80 to 90 minutes. Okay, so our fruit cake is now baked. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Toothpick inserted into the center just came out with a little bit of moist crumbs. So now I've put it on a wire rack, and I'm just going to let it cool. And then when we come back, we will brush it with some alcohol. So now our cake has cooled down. I take off the ring and peel back the paper, and then I find I can just lift it right off that plate. And then it's still a little warm, but I like to brush it with the alcohol while it's still a little warm this time. So now I'm just you can just take a toothpick or some kind of skewer and just poke some holes all over the top. Help that alcohol get in, and then I usually just around the sides. And then, because I put Grand Marnier in my cake, I'm going to actually brush it with some Grand Marnier. Again, you could use brandy, cognac, sherry, rum, whiskey, and just put a nice coating. Now what you're going to do is we're going to do this, and then I'm going to let it finish cooling. Then I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap and foil. And if you had like a cake tin, you could put it in your cake tin. And we want to store it, you know, like I said, I find 2-3 weeks, and then take it out, you know, a couple times a week, and just again brush it with whatever alcohol you're using. And then you'll have a wonderful flavored fruitcake. And like I said, the alcohol acts as a preservative. Now, if you live in a cooler, like you want to store this cake once you cover it and store it in a cool, dry place. Of course, if you're in a colder climate, you can just maybe put it in your basement or something like that. Because I live in a very warm climate, I store it in the fridge and then just take it out, you know, a couple times a week and brush it. And then after that time, you will have a wonderful tasting fruitcake. Like I said, you can store it for several months, or you can freeze it. I find at least a year you can freeze it, which is nice because then all year you can just take out. So I'm going to try it. This one I made probably, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago, so I would have it ready to try. And as you can see, it gets, because I keep brushing it with alcohol over the weeks, it gets much darker in color. So you don't worry if yours does that. Oh. I know fruitcake's one of those things, you either love it or you hate it. I personally love it. So moist. So flavorful. You've got all those fruit, all the dried and candied fruit and the nuts. And then I find the alcohol flavor, it adds moisture, but it's not as strong, really, like alcohol flavor. Just very nice orange. Very nice. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.